or perhaps latent Chamorro feminism, the likes of which, ironically, can help us rethink the terms of our present engagement with the returning Marines. It was under Governor Dorn's administration that Johnston first took her oath as a teacher and public servant. Johnston tells us that Dorn, who another Chamorro educator called Guam's patriarch of ex-governors, was also a first for her in so many life-changing ways. Between her notes and his diary, Dorn apparently was quite fond of Agata, who he called, quote-unquote, the pretty little teacher. And he definitely looked after her welfare. Once, for example, according to Dorn, there was a disagreeable office happening wherein a woman named Maria charged Johnston, who was then unmarried, carrying her maiden name Iglesias. A woman named Maria charged Johnston with using, quote-unquote, scurrilous and insulting language. Miss Iglesias immediately sent Dorn an affidavit denying the charges. It was important for her, in fact, that he in particular not have wrong ideas about her character. Agata wrote, I have had the many pleasant acquaintances with all the American governors of Guam during my time, but usually the first of everything is the most impressive and lasting. Governor Dorn has left in my mind the most lasting impression and the most appealing. Under his orders, Gautier William was transferred from his duties as a Marine to a teaching position which culminated in his becoming my teacher in the evening high school and later my husband. When Governor Dorn found out that Gautier was interested in me, he showed no disapproval. When Gautier wished to buy the rest of his enlistment out of the Marine Corps so that he could marry me, the governor was most cooperative. If Governor Dorn were a teacher, I'd easily consider myself one of his pupils. Evidence of deep affection and admiration, but not of romantic love, which by all accounts was faithfully reserved for the Marine Gautier. The recollection also points again to the hierarchy, but also mutual affection that could exist among naval, Marine, and Chamorro teachers. At the top of the hierarchy, of course, sits the governor, who Johnston apparently judges to be the best of all she's encountered. For Johnston, Dorn is the most appealing. For example, his show of no disapproval upon discovering Gautier's interest in me and his most cooperative support of Gautier's wedding plans that included releasing the Marines from their usual assignments so that they could participate in the wedding, clearly indicates that Agata was aware of Dorn's fondness of her. Her deep admiration was linked to her deeper gratitude over the fact that Dorn could have easily halted or at least seriously impeded the relationship that proved to be life-changing for Agata Johnston. Another telling anecdote has Dorn coming to Agata Johnston's defense in what appears to be yet another smear campaign against her. In the anecdote, however, we are given a glimpse into a much deeper kind of conflict and tension that brings us back to the issue of indigenous Chamorro cultural politics as it is implicated in intimate relations with agents of American naval colonialism. Like the previous quote, this one also warrants full quotation in order to appreciate how far up and out Agata Johnston's humble roots have reached in the soil of naval colonialism in Guam. For the youngster, it could be a kite, a top or jumping rope fads. At a certain time, there was a poetry fad. This fad would have had its merits, but the poets would poke fun at or ridicule people, parties or gatherings. The poems would be typed or handwritten and thrown into people's windows or doors. Everybody concerned was angry, but no one knew who the poet or the poets were. I was not to be exempted as a recipient of these poems, as I knew already that I had aroused disapproval for selecting an American to be my suitor. So it wasn't very long before some of these cleverly written verses reached my house. For a while they were mild and childish, mostly making fun of my sudden transformation. Then I received one which was very personal. I thought then that perhaps this might be the time to put a stop to it. I took all the copies of the poems that I had received to the governor. The typewritten ones were found to be done at the courthouse typewriters. But who did it, nobody could tell, as everyone at the courthouse had access to typewriters, from the judges to the messengers. Anyway, the governor issued an order that anyone using government paper and typewriter for other purposes than government business would be punished and discharged. Ostensibly about Agata Johnson's outward and upward social mobility, about her new transformation, these new criticisms are actually about Johnston's decision to marry an American, her desire for an American suitor. I am presuming here that her principal detractors are Chamorros with similar investments in Americans and American modernity, like new clerical jobs in the naval government offices from which they could engage in what Dorn earlier dismissed as disagreeable office happenings. For instance, they could type, and they knew new literary forms like poetry and poetic barbs, the power of the pen. But through these modern practices, they were no less Chamorro and were most likely Chamorro men. Perhaps these men bristled out of jealousy or insecurity, personal or professional. Maybe it was because of spurned or unrequited interest, or maybe a reaction at the success of a native woman who was not even of their class, or if so, as a member of their class, showed them up by her success and achievements and promotions. Either way, in these antics, Agata Johnston was clearly being viewed as transgressing her proper place as a Chamorro woman. Furthermore, I believe that the poetic lines, especially the quote-unquote too personal ones, over which she finally drew the line, for which she went marching to the governor, were actually lines drawn by the detractors when it came to marriage to a white man. Perhaps we can view the poems, her access to the governor, marriage to an American, a Marine at that, if the detractor was upper class, as modern-day slingstones. But what might it mean if the authors of the disagreeable office happenings and the sharp-tongued poetry were other Chamorro women? Here may be a case of ancient cultural patterns among competitive Chamorro women repeating themselves, only with new social materiality. As we saw earlier, Agata Johnston also worked closely with American women, which, as in the case of the Partera, the nurse midwives, also allows us to see how Chamorro women try to author modernization in realms such as education, beauty salons, pageants and entertainment, clerical work and typewriters. Let me thus turn to the final section of this talk, to the narratives of loyalty and patriotism that are ostensibly to America, that in fact can also be understood as advancing a specifically Chamorro notion of progress through the agency of a Chamorro woman, that cannot simply be celebrated or dismissed as the product of colonial Americanization under the auspices of the US Navy. In a 1939 campaign speech for the Guam House of Council, Agata Johnston told residents of Hagåtña that she had never intended to run for office, but that because her friends had placed her name in the contest, and because she was, quote unquote, accustomed to rendering public service, Johnston agreed to run. She proceeded to share the things she believed to be in Guam's best interest, beginning with the question of its political relationship to the United States. The people of Guam can obtain progress and the granting of more privileges easier by a friendly, harmonious, and cooperative attitude toward the government than by any other method. The legal status of the people of Guam has been defined as being neither aliens nor citizens, but wards of the government. This means that we stand in the same relation to the United States as a child does to his guardian, or I might go so far as to say, a child to his parent. The government of the United States has bestowed on us I'm quoting Augusta Johnston's excerpts